So y'all go ahead and do the factoring and the math knowledge question. Pause the video, and then once everyone is finished, you can unpause the video, and I'll show you the correct answers. So for this factoring, it's very similar to how x squared plus 6x plus 5 is going to factor. That would factor as x plus 5 times x plus 1. Now, we have an x to the 4th. The only thing that's going to multiply by itself to give you x to the 4th is x squared. And if you look here, we have x squared. And so when you distribute, you would get x to the 4th, and you would have 1x squared, and then 5x squared, and then plus 5. And those two together make the 6x squared. And so this would be how you factor that factoring question. For the math knowledge question, we have what percent of 2/3 is 1/3? Well, this is back from Algebra 2, the percent of something is something else. And so we don't know what our percentage is, but we know our of is 2/3 and our is 1/3. Well, if you solve for your p, you would just multiply by the reciprocal of 3/2, which would give you 1/2. So your percentage is 50%. Half of 2/3 is 1/3. Okay? So we are looking at lesson 100 today. We did skip lesson 99. That's on sequences and series and stuff. And I told you we were going to skip all of those lessons this year. So we are not going to be looking at lesson 99. We're dealing with 100. It's dealing with the product identities. And then we have more sum and difference identities. So hopefully after this lesson, you'll understand the product identities and the sum and difference identities. So we want to develop the identity for the sine of A times the cosine of B. And so what we are going to use on these is the sine of A plus B, the sine of A minus B, the cosine of A plus B, the cosine of A minus B. On these examples, we're going to be using those identities that we looked at a couple of weeks ago. And so I am going to go ahead and write them all out, and then I'm just going to copy and paste them for each of the examples that we have. If you want to just look at the note page where you have all of these written, you can do that. So that would be the first one. Then the second one. Remember, you were supposed to memorize these. So if you haven't, you are definitely going to need to do so that you can do these correctly. Okay, so we are looking for which two have the sine of A and the cosine of B. Well, that is going to be in the first two. So I'm going to erase these bottom two here. And so what you do, you're going to write those two down. So if you need to pause the video real quick, you can. But now we are going to want to solve for this right here. And so if you add these two together, you'll have the sine of A plus B plus the sine of A minus B. And then you'll have equals 2 sine of A, cosine of B, and then the cosine of A, sine of B part cancels because one was positive and one was negative. And so now all we need to do is to solve for the sine of sine of A, cosine of B. So we divide by the 2 here. And so the sine of A, cosine of B equals 1/2 the left side, which is the sine of A plus B plus the sine of A minus B. And so that is how you develop it. You have to know the sine of A plus B and the sine of A minus B in order to develop it, but it's a pretty short development once you know which two to use. Okay, let's look at the next one. We want to develop the identity for cosine of A times the sine of B. So let's look at these. Which one has the cosine of A and the sine of B? The top two. So we're again going to erase the bottom two. And so we have these two terms here that we are wanting to keep. So in order to keep them, we're going to have to change that bottom equation to negative for every term, multiply it by -1 so that it doesn't get canceled out. And so now we're going to add our equations. We'll have the sine of a plus b minus the sine of a minus b equals the sine of a cosine of b cancels, and then we have 2 cosine of a sine of b. You're going to divide by 2 on both sides, and so you have the sine of a cosine of a sine of b equals 1/2 times the left side, sine of a plus b minus sine of a minus b. And so that would be your development for the cosine of a times the sine of b. Okay, now we're going to look at the development for the cosine of a, the cosine of b. So again, we're going to write down these 4, or you can just look in your notes, and then the 2 that we want to use are going to be the bottom 2. So we're going to erase the top 2, because we are looking for the cosine of a, cosine of b, which is right here. And so if you add your 2 equations, you'll have the cosine of a plus b plus the cosine of a minus b equals 2 cosine of a, cosine of b, and then the sine of a, sine of b parts cancel. And so you divide by 2. And so the cosine of a, cosine of b equals 1/2 the cosine of a plus b plus the cosine of a minus b. And so that would be the development for the cosine of a, cosine of b. Okay, so we've got one more to do. We're going to look for the sine of a times the sine of b. And so if you look at these 4, the ones that you're going to want to use are again the bottom 2. And so we are wanting to keep this term here, so we need to negate the top one so that those terms don't cancel out. So I would have the cosine of a minus b minus the cosine of a plus b equals the cosine of a, cosine of b cancels, and then you have 2 sine of a, sine of b. So you'll divide by 2. And we have that the sine of a times the sine of b equals 1/2 the cosine of a minus b minus the cosine of a plus b. And so that would be the development for the sine of a times the sine of b. Okay, so that's how you would develop those product identities. Now there are 4 other ones that we're going to look at very briefly. We are not going to develop these identities. So the sine of x plus the sine of y is equal to 2 sine of x plus y over 2 times the cosine of x minus y over 2. We are not going to develop that. I'm going to let you write it down. You may use it in your homework, but we're not actually going to develop it, okay? So on your homework, if it says to develop it, you won't actually develop it, okay? Same thing for the other 3. We have the sine of x minus y equals 2 cosine of x plus y over 2 times the sine of x minus y over 2. You also have the cosine of x plus the cosine of y equals 2 cosine of x plus y over 2 times the cosine of x minus y over 2. And then you also have the cosine of x minus the cosine of y, which is 2 sine of x plus y over 2 times 2 sine of x minus y over 2. So again, these 4, you will not have to develop it. I want you to have them in your notes because they may give you numbers to plug in later, but you will not develop these on your homework or on your test. Okay? So on your homework, you do get to omit number 1, 6, 9, 10, 11, and 12. So that means you have 24 questions to do tonight for homework. So make sure you do those so that we can go over any questions that you have tomorrow. Oh, and one thing to note, for number 19 on your homework, start with the right side. for your show that. For number 19, that's when you want to start with the right side to simplify. So I told you most of the time you do the left side, that's one that you want to work with the right side. Okay?